you've been watching cable news in the last 24 hours, and we sincerely hope that you have been, you've probably seen one of the Pew Research poll findings that 1 of every 4 Muslim Americans younger than 30 believe suicide bombing in the defense of Islam is justifiable. The poll, of course, is subject to interpretation. Just look at the competing headlines in today's USA Today and today's New York Post. One man's reassurance is the sum of another man's fears. Muslim Americans reject extremes. Bombshell on the other side. Fascinating. Well, suicide bombing is one of the many remarkable questions in this poll. For instance, here's a finding. Only 36% of black Muslim Americans in the survey expressed very unfavorable opinions about al-Qaeda. Here to tell us what all this means, Ibrahim Hooper. He's the spokesman for the Council on American-Islamic Relations. Mr. Hooper, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So if you ask any group of people in the world, how do you feel about al-Qaeda? And only 36% of that group say they have a very unfavorable view. That's a huge problem, it seems to me.
No, I think if you look at the overall results of the survey, it paints a portrait of a community that's well integrated in American society, and that the vast majority of American Muslims rejects terrorism and religious extremism.
The vast majority? Then why do only 36% of American-born black Muslims have a very unfavorable view of al-Qaeda?
I think that might be a reflection more of the general alienation of many segments of the African-American community.
Okay, then let's try this. How about the overall, all American Muslims, only 58%, a little more than half, had a very unfavorable view of al-Qaeda.
Well, I think if you add up that very unfavorable and the unfavorable and all the negative responses,
if you add very unfavorable to unfavorable, somewhat unfavorable, you only have 68%.
I mean, 68, 70%, that's a pretty
of al-Qaeda?
strong,
what about Hitler?
majority.
What do you think? I mean, no, I'm serious.
I think
if you can't take a stand against al-Qaeda, then
you've got a study of more than 100 pages with innumerable questions in it, and I think it's wrong to focus on a couple questions to put forward an agenda that goes against the bulk of the findings.
Actually, the bulk of the findings, I think, are pretty clear. So in case you don't believe it, here's what they are. Are you concerned about the rise of Islamic extremism in the United States? Only 61% are concerned about the rise of Islamic extremism.
If you presuppose that American Muslims don't see a rise of extremism in the United States, then that answer makes perfect sense.
Okay, well,
I don't see a rise of religious extremism in the Muslim community.
The guys who are just arrested in New Jersey.
I mean, you've got millions of American Muslims. There's going to be somebody who does something wrong, and I think it's unfair to generalize the actions of individuals to an entire religious minority.
Okay. How about this? These are questions, these are the problems facing U.S. Muslims. What are the biggest problems? Discrimination, being viewed as terrorists, ignorance about Islam, stereotyping, negative media portrayals. I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim, I'm a victim. You get down to radical Islam. Only 3% believe that's a major problem.
Well, again, if you don't believe that there is a strain of Islamic extremism in the United States, then you're going to answer that way. And I think the vast majority of American Muslims
these numbers show that there is. For instance, do you believe that Arabs carried out the 9/11 attacks? Only 40% believe Arabs carried them out. If you ask foreign-born Muslims in this country, Arabs, only 22%.
I think that's a reflection of some wishful thinking, that people just can't believe that Muslims would have carried out such a terrible crime, and
that's
they're
like
hoping
the equivalent of Holocaust denial. I mean, don't you think that your group and others ought to be doing more to educate people who are denying a basic historic reality?
I mean, as soon as Osama bin Laden issued his tape taking credit, we issued a statement saying it's quite obvious now that he did
Obviously, your education efforts have fallen short if only 40% believe it.
I think if you did a poll the
poll
of the American community at large, you might get similar responses. There are a great many people who buy into conspiracy theories.
60% of the population?
I don't know what it would be.
Look, all I'm saying is, look, I'm not saying you're unreasonable. I'm not saying your group is crazy. I'm saying that 60% of the people who answer this question are, by definition, unreasonable. And that's a problem in any community, and you don't see it as one.
What I think it is they look at this horrendous act and they just say, how could any Muslim carry it out? I'm just going to, block it out of my mind somehow that Muslims didn't do it, when in fact Muslims did do it.
Huh. I wonder what you see in the answer to this question. Was the war in Afghanistan the right or wrong decision? 48%, about half, responded to the war in Afghanistan was. So, I mean, I'm not surprised considering they don't think that Arabs were responsible in the first place.
I mean,
right?
There's a growing number of people, particularly about the Iraq situation. In the larger society, more than half of Americans believe it was wrong to go into Iraq. So it's
Iraq is not Afghanistan.
No, but it's not surprising that American Muslims have problems with our foreign policy. That's clear. We've stated that repeatedly.
But they're not against al-Qaeda in the numbers that most people are, judging by these numbers, and they don't believe that Muslims were behind 9/11. So I just think
if you look at the totality,
objectively, that's a problem. If you don't see it as one.
If you look at the totality of the survey results, the views of American Muslims more or less mirror the views of people of all faiths in America. Work hard to get ahead, send your kids to school.
That's demonstrably untrue on these questions, just for the record.
On several questions out of hundreds of questions, and it would be nice if you could focus on some of the positive aspects.
I don't believe there were
as
hundreds.
Well,
instead
instead of just cherry picking a couple questions.
I have some of the questions right here. They're not hundreds, and I thought those are the most telling. And you're not concerned, but I am. But I appreciate you coming on.
I'm concerned that you would pick on only negative.
Right, you're a victim, of course. I totally forgot. It's always the media's fault.
Right,
positive no one in the community is unreasonable. It's always the media. I'm sorry, I forgot my talking points.
No, I never criticize the media. The media is my friend.
Okay, I can tell. Ibrahim Hooper, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.